States have captured bin Laden and renditioned him back to the United States well before the 9/11 attacks. Well, this is something I want to talk about, but in order to make sense of this timeline, I have to go back to explain why the U.S. failed to capture bin Laden in the mid 1990s. After the defeat of the Soviet Union in 1989 by the Arab Afghan mujahedeen and the Afghans themselves, Iraq invaded Kuwait August 2nd, 1990, and bin Laden returned to Saudi Arabia, a hero's welcome to the Arab Afghan mujahideen and the militants around the world. He had offered the Saudi government the use of his thousands of mujahideen fighters to defend the country in case the Baathist regime had attacked it. There really was no hard evidence to suggest that was the case, but nevertheless, they wanted to be proactive. The Saudi government, in turn, turned him down. Instead, they chose King Fahd's addition to allow over 300,000 U.S. soldiers in Saudi oil instead. Bin Laden was enraged by this. Kuffar entering the two holiest places in all of Islam in Mecca and Medina. The Gulf War ends in 1991 in March, actually, and the U.S. stations over 30,000 soldiers in Saudi Arabia, and this was permanent. This was reported by The Nation in February of 1999. President George H.W. Bush Sr. falsely claimed that all the U.S. troops have withdrawn, not to enrage the militants around the world. However, the U.S. troops' presence is not admitted until later on, until 1995, and that there had never been an official explanation as to why they remained there. But we all know why now, because Saudi Arabia needed their military presence to thwart off the militant extremists that they helped to create in Al Qaeda and Abu Sayyaf and Jemaah Islamiyah in the region. Now, the same article by The Nation postulates that they are stationary there to prevent a coup by the Baathist regime, but Saddam Hussein had no such inclination to do so. In fact, Saudi Arabia has an incredible array of high-tech weaponry, but lacks the expertise to use it in fear that the Saudi soldiers might flip and change loyalties to bin Laden's army. So there's another reason why they stood. But bin Laden back in 1998 released a statement, and the statement I'll read is, quote, "For more than 70 years, the United States have been occupying the lands of Islam in the holiest of places, the Arabian Peninsula, plundering its riches, dictating to its rulers, humiliating its people, terrorizing its neighbors, turning its bases in the peninsula with a spearhead to which to fight the neighboring Muslim peoples." End quote. And that was 1999. Gerald Posner, who's an author, claimed that there had been classified U.S. intelligence reports describing a secret deal between bin Laden and the Saudi intelligence minister of the Mahabeth, Prince Turki Al Faisal. And though bin Laden had become an enemy to the kingdom itself, he is nonetheless too popular for his role with the Mujahideen in Afghanistan to be killed or to be permanently imprisoned. And according to Gerald Posner, bin Laden, and he wrote this in the book, Posner's book, I want to say was, I don't remember it offhand, but if I do, I'll let you know. But it was, I have his book actually. It's Why America Slept, the failure to prevent 9/11. It's actually a good book, by the way. That, according to the book, bin Laden is allowed to leave Saudi Arabia with his money and supporters, but the Saudi government will publicly disown him. And also, at the same time, later on, and this is not in the book, that bin Laden's family disowns him in 96 as well. Privately, the Saudis will continue to fund his supporters with the understanding that they'll never be used against Saudi Arabia because they knew bin Laden would be attacking the kingdom for their treachery and allowing U.S. soldiers to remain there. But at the same time, they're feeding the Frankenstein monster. It's similar to what Israel did with Hamas, right? Israel helped to create Hamas under Yassin to thwart off the Palestinian liberation, the PLO, and the Palestinian Authority. The wrath of the fundamentalist movement is thus directed away from the vulnerable Saudis, but bin Laden directs his attacks to the West. And also in the book, Posner alleges that the Saudis effectively had bin Laden on their payroll even well before that, at the start of the decade in 1990. Bin Laden returned, I think he leaves in the summer of 91 to the Sudan. And in 1994, the Saudi government revokes bin Laden's citizenship and moves to freeze his assets in Saudi Arabia because of his support for Muslim and fundamentalist movements, mainly Abu Sayyaf in the Philippines, Jemaah Islamiyah in Indonesia, and Al-Qaeda affiliates worldwide. However, allegedly, this is only a public front, and they privately continue to support him through a secret deal made back in 1991 again. So it's like not once, but twice they're making these deals with bin Laden. And they know what bin Laden's about. They know bin Laden's a militant. They know bin Laden's at war against the West. Meanwhile, Saudi Arabia, an ally for the West, is allowing U.S. Military to station there. And also, they're the biggest purchasers of U.S.-made weaponry. Now, the Saudis were said to have pressured into this move by U.S. officials who privately met with with King Fahd and his officials and confronted them with satellite imagery of al-Qaeda training camps in the Sudan. And that came from the CIA. Now, hear me out. The CIA was in the Sudan monitoring bin Laden's whereabouts, but they were monitoring well before that. Now, when I interviewed Michael Scheuer, the former head of the bin Laden Issue Station from 1996 to 1999, he admitted that the CIA was in the Sudan monitoring bin Laden and also in Afghanistan. Now, it's not like that they knew what bin Laden was about by then, but they were still gathering intelligence about him. And also, well before the 9/11 attacks, the U.S. government had their chances at getting bin Laden, but rejected him. Now, I want to play a video before I leave here. Not this video, this is my sound bar, but what I want to do is I want to play this video. And it's from King Faisal, Turki bin Faisal, the directorate of the Mahabet, right? And in it, you're going to see him being interviewed in the year 2021, all right? And listen to what he has to say regarding U.S. officials and the Sudanese government and the Saudi Arabian government about the rendition of Osama bin Laden in the early 1990s. Take a look.
1996 السودانيين عرضوا تسليم أسامة بن لادن للأمريكان، فقالوا الأمريكان إنه لا يوجد لدينا أدلة كافية لمحاكمته.
نعم، وهذا اللي حصل. أنا لا أدري إيش كانت مبررات الأمريكان عندما قالوا الشيء هذا، ولكن كما ذكرت أيضا إنه الرئيس البشير عرض على الملك عبد الله قبل ما يعرض على الامريكان.
ما الذي دار بينهم طالما؟
يعني انا لم احضرها، ولكن ما سمعت
حسب ما رويته
من المسلمين كما ذكرت انا في كتابي.
نعم.
انه الرئيس البشير قال للملك عبد الله، قال له احنا نبغى نسلمكم بن لادن او فيما معناه بهالمعنى هذا. فقال له الملك عبد الله اهلا وسهلا، يعني نرتب للشيء هذا. قال له بس عندي اشتراط. قال له ايش هو؟ قال له ان لا يحاكم ولا يعرض لمساءلة إذا سلمناه لكم. قال له الملك عبد الله ما نقدر، احنا عندنا شرع الله سبحانه وتعالى وما في أحد فوق الشرع. حيحاسب على ما قام به. فحينها سكت ولم يعاود العرض على الملك عبد الله. بعد إذن حاولوا يقدموا بن لادن للأمريكان. الأمريكان في ذلك الحين كما ورد على لسان الرئيس كلينتون في مذكراته أعتقد قالها، أنه لم يكن لديهم في أمريكا دلائل تثبت عمل بن لادن ضد الولايات المتحدة في ذلك الحين، وبالتالي إذا استلموه ما حيقدروا يحاكموه بزعم موقفهم الرسمي.
في الكتاب طال عمرك تحدثتم عن بعض النقاط.
As you could see there, that there wasn't much in the way of evidence against bin Laden in the early 1990s because bin Laden and Al-Qaeda was still forming in the Sudan. And even though that they were growing at the time, they did not have an official position against attacking the West until the U.S. forcibly extradited them out of the Sudan because they were going to put sanctions on the Sudan under President Bashir. Bashir and the National Islamic Front's leader, Hassan al-Turabi, who invited bin Laden to the Sudan, and where bin Laden spent millions and millions of dollars in providing the countries and promoting the infrastructure of the country, along with paying off his militants and training them, went back to Afghanistan, where the family disowned bin Laden by 1996. The government of Saudi Arabia disowned bin Laden as well in that year, and bin Laden's vitriol grew. And I think this is where the transition from bin Laden being this, Arab Afghan hero against the Soviet Union, anti-communist, now turned his attention to the West and the United States. It's like almost like the United States didn't create bin Laden, but they helped to facilitate his vitriol against the West by basically having him exiled everywhere. And then when the United States had their chances at neutralizing a threat that they helped to create just about, in that regards, they chose not to. And of course, this actually could be foreseen. I mean, a regular individual like myself, anyone else could see that they're helping to create the Frankenstein monster that they didn't need to create in the first place. All they could have done was basically allow for bin Laden to remain in the Sudan and not sanction the country and exiling him elsewhere by further irritating him. Now, the CIA also had their chances to neutralize the threat in the Sudan, but the State Department under Clinton did not pull the trigger. In fact, Richard Clark, the counterterrorism czar under the Clinton and Bush administrations, was fully in approval of this, but through the legal means, the CIA had their hands tied because of the warrant of the Church Committee hearings regarding them going outside the laws of the United States in regards to assassinations and covert, black ops plots. When 9/11 happened, the CIA went right back to their old ways. And so there you have it, the explanation for bin Laden and his exile out of Saudi Arabia. All right. Thank you very much, guys, for tuning in. See you next video. Have a good afternoon, everybody.